So, a single new US tariff is about to completely shake up decades of Australian trade policy. But, the story doesn't start where you'd think. It actually starts with a bit of confusion. Let's break it down.
Right off the bat, nobody seems to be on the same page. Is this new U.S. global tariff 10% or is it 15? You've got an official document saying one thing and social media saying something else entirely. And that uncertainty, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But honestly, whether it's 10 or 15%, that almost isn't the point. The real story here is that this new policy, whatever the final number, threatens to completely erase a hard-won economic advantage that has been a huge benefit to Australia for years.
Okay, so let's try to cut through all the noise. What exactly is this new tariff? And where in the world did these two different numbers come from?
And here's where it all gets a little messy. You've got the official, signed executive order, which clearly states a 10% tariff. But then, over the weekend, presidential tweets started throwing around a higher 15% figure. So while the policy on paper is 10%, it really feels like the political winds are blowing towards 15.
So why is this flat rate tariff such a huge deal for Australia in particular? I mean, whether it's 10 or 15%, why does it hit them so hard? Well, it goes right to the very heart of how global trade actually works.
The reason this matters so much all comes down to one key economic idea: competitive advantage. See, for years, Australia had a special agreement that gave it a leg up, a real edge in the U.S. market, because it paid lower taxes on its goods. This really shows the shift in a nutshell. Before, you had this free trade agreement that basically gave Australia a spot on the winner's podium. It had lower tariffs than its competitors. Now, a single flat rate puts everyone at the exact same starting line. And Australia's special advantage? Poof, it's gone. So yeah, the playing field has been leveled, but it's come at a huge cost to Australia. All those years of diplomatic work that went into creating this special trade relationship have basically been wiped out, and it's putting two very old allies at odds. And this isn't just some minor economic tweak, it has really sparked a major disagreement. So let's look at the arguments on each side because they are pretty far apart. From the U.S. perspective, the justification really comes down to this one staggering number: over $37 trillion in national debt. And to put that into perspective, the interest payment alone on that debt last year was $1.2 trillion. So the argument from the U.S. is pretty straightforward. They're saying, look, these tariffs might be a blown instrument, but they're a necessary tool to generate revenue and just start chipping away at that mountain of debt. But Australia has a completely different take. They're arguing that this move, first off, violates their free trade agreement. Second, it's just not how allies should treat each other. And third, at the end of the day, it's just going to hurt American consumers. And they actually have a pretty recent example to back this up. Australia's Trade Minister, Don Farrell, points to a previous U.S. tariff on Australian beef. He says the only thing that happened was that prices for things like hamburgers went up for Americans. And you know what? That tariff was eventually removed for that exact reason. It was fueling inflation. So, what do you do when your key advantage in the U.S. market just suddenly vanishes? Australia has a choice to make. How is it going to navigate these very, very choppy new waters?
It looks like Australia's response is a two-part plan. First, they're going to confront the issue head-on with diplomacy, and at the exact same time, they're working to future-proof their economy by looking for new partners.
So, step one is going straight to the source. Australia's trade minister is set to meet his U.S. counterpart, Jameson Greer, to argue their case and make it absolutely crystal clear that they are not happy with this decision at all.
Now for the second part, which is maybe even more strategic for the long term. This whole situation is adding, in the minister's own words, further impetus to finally get a huge trade deal with the European Union over the line. It's a classic move. When things get uncertain, you diversify.
And get this, that EU deal is incredibly close. I mean, they've apparently made more progress in just the last few weeks than in the past 25 years. But it all comes down to one final hurdle. Australia is insisting on fair market access for its agricultural products, and it's a point they say they will not back down on. You know, this whole episode really leaves us with a bigger question, one about the future of global commerce. In a world where trade deals can be torn up so quickly, does this moment signal a permanent shift for countries like Australia? Are we seeing the end of relying too heavily on any single partner?